Thank you. First of all, I'm honored to be here with the President of the Deputies Chamber, Mr. Marcel Ciolacu, Mrs. Mami Mizutori, who is the Special Representative of the Secretary General of the United Nations for Disaster Risk Reduction, and Presidential Advisor, Mrs. Diana Paun, who is with us from the part of the Presidential Administration. Your Excellencies, dear colleagues and dear friends, it's been over 1 year and a half since we had the first discussion with Mrs. Mizutori to have a conference on societal resilience, to talk about communications during crisis, to talk on how we can build up trust of the citizens in the authorities, and how we can pass our messages during a crisis time. And now it's the time. You are all here. Thank you for coming. And when we talk about resilience, we talk at different levels. It's a word which is used in many ways. But when we talk about societal resilience, we don't talk about only institutions or groups of people and so on. We talk about the individual, in fact. We talk about the person. If our individuals, our citizens, one by one, are not resilient, then the society is not resilient and the country is not resilient. And this is the basis on which we will start this conference. Please allow me, first of all, to call the Presidential Advisor, Mrs. Diana Paun, to say a few words from the part of the Presidency. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Raed Arafat. Good morning. Madam Special Representative, dear President Ciolacu, ladies and gentlemen, it is my particular honor to address you at the opening of this important event held under the high patronage of His Excellency President Klaus Werner Iohannis. The seminar, Understanding and Communicating Existing and Future Risk, Ensuring Evidence-Based Communication, jointly organized by the Ministry of Internal Affairs through the Department for Emergency Situations and the UN Office for Disaster Risk Reduction, is an initiative that we greatly appreciate. We pay particular attention to this topic given the implications of risk communication and the effects of the measure undertaken to respond to disasters, crises, and emergency situations. Today's event, therefore, provides a unique benchmark for developing strategies, public policies, and appropriate evidence-based communication guidelines. Together, we are called to join our efforts to co-create them and make them available to the social body when needed, but also to strengthen over time the resistance of society. The resilience of the state, institutions, and citizens has been a top priority for institutions implementing the national strategic vision. Romania, a resilient state in the face of threats, is an objective of the National Strategy for the Defense of the Country 2020-2024, prioritize and put into action through specific guidelines and measures. Adequate and immediate response to disasters, pandemics, various crises and emergencies, and coordinated and tailored communication are essential to the profile of a resilient state and represents a benchmark for institutional performance and public trust in the state to whom it belongs. Ensure national resilience requires the creation of a safety belt in relation to existing vulnerabilities that can assist the state in withstanding shocks caused by security threats, including hybrid ones. We believe that the action of the state towards strengthening social resilience must be guided by institutional coordination, tailored citizen-centric approaches, and flexibility. Transparency and consultation mechanisms at all levels are also mandatory for strengthening the state ability to react on time. Decisional and operational transparency and strategic communication are essential in countering threats and building a resilient state. Interinstitutional cooperation and various forms of partnership with NGOs, the private sector, and other forms of civic association must be the basis when managing and communicating the risk related to disasters, situations of crisis, and civil emergencies. The institutional response must be tailored to the risk profile. Institutional communication plays an important role in preventing and limiting the spread of disinformation, propaganda, and other forms of informational aggression. The crises of recent years have highlighted the importance of the good functioning of some essential systems. The lessons learned from the COVID-19 pandemic can strengthen our actions in the future. We are aware that various other crises and emergency situations will continue to represent challenges for the actors responsible for their management, including from the perspective of communication. The ability to quickly apply lessons learned and share good practices, such as those discussed at this event, will increase the effectiveness of our joint measures. Along with cooperation, coordination, and communication, education can contribute decisively to states' action. Educating and informing the young public, as well as other age segments, to stimulate the resilient behavior of the individual is necessary for creating societal resilience on a large scale. I thank you and express my firm belief that today's event is a landmark for institutional models of best practices and actions in the field of resilience. Thank you very much.
It's my honor now to invite the President of the Deputies Chamber, Mr. Marcel Ciolacu. Sunt onorat să-l invit acum pe domnul președinte al Camerei Deputaților.
Dear Deputy Secretary General, dear Minister, dear President Advisor, ladies and gentlemen, it is a true honor to welcome you here today at the headquarters of the Romanian Parliament. I'm happy to be here, and I take this opportunity to express my deep admiration for every effort, all the efforts made in order to prepare the population to face disasters. We all agree that decision makers have to start to think about ways by which challenges would be approached on the long term, and by which potential solutions would cover a longer span than a single presidential term. And I would just want to be crystal clear now. The message of the entire political party, especially during humanitarian disasters, should be one focused on solidarity, on supporting the activity performed by professionals to the end of reducing the consequences of catastrophes. Ladies and gentlemen, we should not be shy and admit the fact that in the future we'll have to face with the consequences of climate change and consequences of other disasters that might be more severe than everything that we've been faced with so far. And we need to learn from the past, from past lessons, in order to make sure that we are ready for what's to come in the following decades. We all know that risks can be mitigated. Ideally, down to an acceptable level, but they can never be reduced to zero. That's why preparedness should be our top priority. We might never know how our resilience will be tested one day. However, what we know is that those challenges will come in the future. The crises we've been through have shown us once more that an efficient communication of risks can save lives, and they represent the core of early response, an efficient response to emergency situation. The misinformation, false news cannot be ignored because they can have devastating effects on some segments of the population. What makes a society resilient during the crisis is the high trust that population has in the state institution. There is no secret the fact that those countries that manage to overcome disasters are those states in which the population trusts the authorities. It's very important to understand the sources of misinformation and the intentions behind this in order to acknowledge our own vulnerability. We need to have a strong commitment that requires fast actions in order to identify those involved in discrediting public authorities. And as conspiration promoters move on from social platforms to limited action forums, their opinions will become more radical because they are less exposed to rational opinions. And because of this, fighting false news becomes even more difficult. That's why we need to have an efficient long-term strategy fighting misinformation. In this way, truth is paramount in order to make efficient decisions, and evidence-based policies are essential for human progress. In my closing words, I would like to thank you once again for your involvement, and I would like to assure you that I will be by your side in your constant efforts to fight misinformation and increase social resilience. Thank you very much.
So next, I'm honored, though he's not with us, this morning Her Excellency met the Prime Minister, Mr. Nicolae Ciuca, and he will be talking to us through a recorded message that he recorded yesterday. So I will ask our colleagues to start.
Dear colleagues, first of all, allow me to welcome you to Romania. At the same time, I would like to thank the UN, to the Office for Disaster Risk Reduction, and to the Department for Emergency Situations for organizing this event. Jointly, we are acknowledging today the importance of reducing disaster risks and the need to improve preparedness and response capacities. Disaster risk reduction is the backbone of the risk management concept. This notion of risk in the past year has been changed constantly from a local phenomenon to a regional, a global one. We are all sharing kind of the same risk: climate changes, forest fires, the pandemic we've all been through. They all show us that it's vital to work together in order to mitigate these challenges. Truth be told, we are working in a highly interconnected world, comprised of distinct systems, yet related. And this global interconnectivity has shown us how fast national challenges can spread to become regional and later on global challenges. In this context, disaster risk reduction should be a complex and joint effort, requiring a multi-sectoral approach in order to strengthen resilience to multiple hazards that are interconnected. In Romania, during the past years, this concept of disaster risk reduction has been taken over and integrated in policies and programs focusing on strengthening communities' resilience in face of disasters. As of 2014, we have the National Platform for Disaster Risk Reduction, with a main task, that of implementing all objectives of the international strategy for mitigating disaster risks that has been set by UN, and implementing the policies and programs that have been developed by UN, NATO, and other international bodies that Romania is part of. To this end, Romania will continue to act to strengthen society's disaster resilience and to implement the objectives that have been taken over and to which Romania committed under the Sendai framework for the period 2015-2030. In our efforts to get concrete results when it comes to reducing disaster risk, we should also focus on having a closer to citizens communication. It's important for the citizens, the communities, and last but not least, the state, to understand the risks that they are exposed to. That's why communicating the risks, understanding them, is paramount in order to understand this complex mechanism of reducing disaster risks. Given the fact that some disasters cannot be avoided, in order to significantly reduce the number of potential deaths, it's important for the population to be very well informed. In emergency situations, every second counts. And for this, at national level, we've rolled out various programs and campaigns focusing on educating the population on how to act before, during, and after an emergency situation. In order to increase resilience to future challenges, I feel that improving crisis communication should be a top priority for all of us. Disseminating false information, intently or not, is nothing new. Yet manipulating news have never been more widespread than today, and the fast development of online and social networks increases even more this threat of misinformation. Now it's high time to work together in order to support education and create this prevention culture. We need to be constantly aware about the risk reduction actions and to prevent and understand the risks that the population is exposed to and communicate reliable information sources. To this end, in order to turn our statements into fact, I would like to tell you that through a decision of the Romanian government, as of yesterday, February 22nd, 2023, all national and local public institutions will be compelled to include on their website links to the national platform for emergency situation preparedness, fipregătit.ro, as a reliable source of information for all communities. I'm sure that the discussions during these 2 days will allow you to achieve the expected outcome and that we will be able to advance towards ensuring a more resilient future for the entire community. Thank you very much and all the best.
That was the Prime Minister of Romania, Mr. Nicolae Ciuca. Before inviting Her Excellency Mrs. Mizutori, I just want to pass you the greetings of our Minister of Internal Affairs, Mr. Lucian Bode, who's sadly he's not in the country these 2 days, but he passed his message of success for today's meetings and for tomorrow's high-level ministerial roundtable that will take place also in this building. So I'm going to invite now Her Excellency, Special Representative of the United Nations Secretary General for Disaster Risk Reduction, Mrs. Mizutori, Mami. Please.
Thank you very much Presidential Advisor, Madame Diana Loretta Paul, Mr. Ion-Marcel Ciolacu, President of the Chamber of Deputies, and of course, His Excellency the Prime Minister of Romania, Mr. Nicolae-Ionel Ciuca, and our great friend, Dr. Raed Arafat, Secretary of State, Ministry of Interior of Romania and Head of the Department for Emergency Situations. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much. It is a great honor and pleasure to be here in Bucharest, Romania, to open the third European Forum Disaster Risk Reduction Roadmap Action-Oriented Dialogue. I am grateful to the government of Romania for hosting us and for your leadership in disaster risk reduction. Please allow me to start by expressing our deepest sympathies and solidarity with the people of Turkey and Syria who have and who continue to suffer tremendously from the recent earthquakes. And I want to commend and thank all the governments represented, also many in this room today, including the government of Romania, who have shown great solidarity and generosity in supporting and assisting the people of Turkey and Syria and their governments. And I would like to ask to please continue your support towards their recovery and towards their building back better, and the commitment of the United Nations system with the people of Turkey and Syria will be for them as long as needed. And also, talking about resilience, tomorrow is a very grim day, 1 year from when the war in Ukraine started. And some of you may have noticed the statement made by the UN Secretary General yesterday, mentioning that Russia's attack on Ukraine challenges the cornerstone principles and values of our multilateral system, and it is in violation of the United Nations Charter and international law. The war has inflicted death and suffering of thousands, and at the same time, I know that neighboring countries and countries all over the world have shown again their solidarity and generosity to the people of Ukraine, including here in Romania. Now, we hope that no country faces a disaster of the magnitude that we are seeing in Turkey and Syria now, and of course, the flooding in Pakistan, but many other disasters. And this is the reason why precisely we need to accelerate the full implementation of the Sendai Framework for Disaster Risk Reduction, which is the global blueprint for resilience. In Europe, the implementation of the framework is underpinned by the European Forum for Disaster Risk Reduction Roadmap, which was adopted in 2021 in Matosinhos, Portugal. And today we are carrying out the action-oriented dialogue, which aims to strengthen the ways that risk communication can be used to empower and help communities and each individual to act accordingly so that risk does not become disasters that devastate us. The importance of risk communication has already been mentioned repeatedly by our distinguished speakers today, and it is well recognized in the context of sudden onset hazards. Risk communication is a core element of early warning and early action, and here the UN Secretary General has launched an initiative, Early Warning for All initiative, so that every person in the planet will be covered by early warning in 5 years. But risk communication is much more than the transmission of warning, which is very important. It is about working with communities so that we can jointly understand what is risk and to take action, again jointly, to reduce the risk where and when possible, so that we can protect lives and livelihoods. Risk knowledge is the foundation of all risk reduction efforts. And if risk communication is not done adequately, all our efforts around prevention will be washed away. It is the vehicle by which expert knowledge and policy priorities are communicated to the people, to the public, to the communities. And today, when risk is even more complex than ever, as the Prime Minister eloquently mentioned, that risk is connected and disasters are compounded, we also have to make our risk communication integrated so that they can be effective with this systemic risk that we are facing. Effective disaster risk reduction is no different than any other form of communication, and it can trigger action and behavior change. And the principles of effective risk communication or effective communication, I believe, is the same in any sector. And this is why we are very encouraged today that in this room we have experts from many different sectors, from the media, from health, from the education, and of course we are delighted that we have youth here in this room too, because the youth have a very important role in communicating risk and communicating anything. I would also like to take this opportunity to welcome the EU's recent publication of its disaster resilience goals, stressing how risk communication can save lives by bringing disaster prevention and preparedness awareness into the everyday life of people. Now, we have seen, again, as mentioned by many of our distinguished speakers, how during the COVID-19 pandemic time, risk communication became a vital element for effective action, but also it harmed many people's and useless lives which did not have to be lost, were lost because of disinformation. And I think we have all learned several lessons during this pandemic on what do we need to take into consideration in order to implement good risk communication. Allow me to share with you some of them. So first, we need to know our audience. We need to know who we are talking to and where they are. What is the best way to communicate, and what would innovate, what would incentivize them to take action once they have received the messages. Second, we need to bring the message to the last mile. And these days, we call the last mile even the first mile. This means that the message needs to reach the people who are most vulnerable. And we are talking about the women, the girls, the boys, the people living with disability, people who don't speak the language where they are living, refugees. And it is not easy to overcome these barriers, but if we cannot be proactive in bridging the last mile, risk information is not working. Third, trust, which again was mentioned by many already. If there is no trust, the message will not sink into the people's minds and will not lead to action. And importantly, trust cannot be built overnight. Trust can only be built through long periods of efforts, but also trust can be lost very quickly. So building trust and sustaining trust is very important. Fourth, the use of science. Risk communication has to be based on science and evidence. And this is the only way that we can counter the disinformation. And again, the last important element is about how we can counter misinformation. Misinformation and disinformation can nullify all our efforts around disaster risk reduction and can provoke harmful reactions and can lead to the loss of lives and livelihoods. And we have again seen this so many times in so many countries, in so many ways, unfortunate ways during the pandemic. But not only the pandemic, when there is a crisis, there are always people who want to try to lead people to the other way that we should be heading. So today, I am sure that during these two expert sessions, we will be learning more around this very important issue of risk information. Tomorrow, what you have discussed and what comes out from the sessions will be carried into the high-level ministerial roundtable. I am very grateful once again that we can join you today and would like to thank the government of Romania for providing us with such an important opportunity. And I hope that today will be the start of all of us researching, thinking, and bringing into our policies this important element of what is effective risk information, so that disaster risk reduction, all the efforts will lead us to action. Thank you very much.
So, Your Excellencies and dear colleagues, this meeting is held under the high patronage of the President of Romania and with the direct support of the Deputies Chamber. And this is a signal of how high we are looking at this issue in Romania. The message of the Prime Minister also shows that the government is willing to support all the measures that we see fit to build up trust and to work together not only within Romania, but with every one of our colleagues and partners, because it's not sufficient to work in one country. We need to work all together if we want really to build up resilience, whether on a regional level or even on a global level. So I'm sure that the two expert sessions today will bring us some valuable information to take to the ministerial roundtable. And I hope that this is just the beginning of very serious discussions around building trust and around how to tackle information and risk information in the future to bring this information as near as possible to the citizens and to work with the citizens themselves on improving the resilience of our countries and our communities. Thank you again all for coming. There are 35 delegations that are with us in this conference. There are still representatives which didn't arrive, which will arrive during this day, like Commissioner Lenarčič from the European Commission, like Minister Stylianides from Greece, and like other colleagues coming from ministries in Europe and outside Europe, which will be arriving during this day and participating tomorrow at the round table. So please enjoy the day, and I wish you all a fruitful meeting. Thank you.